Most people think symbols are decoration, meaningless visuals stamped into ancient stone, modern tattoos, or esoteric books. At best, they're called cultural representations. At worst, aesthetic noise. But that's the trick. Symbols were never created to represent reality. They were engineered to write it. A true symbol is not a picture. It is a code, a living key, constructed to interface with consciousness directly. It bypasses logic. It speaks in frequency. It carries memory across time, across bodies, across dimensions. And when you see one, really see one, something in you reacts. A pull, a chill, a forgotten thought surfacing without words. That's not your imagination. That's your system responding to an activation signal. The ancients knew this. They weren't carving birds and spirals and eyes into stone for decoration. They were embedding data, protecting knowledge, encoding truths in forms that couldn't be burned or rewritten. Not because the symbol held the power, but because the mind did. Your consciousness reads symbols the way a computer reads code. Instantly, subconsciously, energetically. And when the code matches your frequency, reality bends. Not like magic, like structure. Because reality isn't built with objects. It's built with perception. And perception is shaped by symbol. Think about this. You see a dollar sign, your body reacts. You see a cross, or a pentagram, or an ankh, and you feel something, even if you don't know why. That's not reaction, that's resonance. You're not responding to an image, you're responding to embedded memory. Memory written in a language older than words, a language made of geometry, vibration, intention. And this language still runs beneath every structure you live inside. Flags, logos, religious seals, corporate branding, even architecture. You're not living in a neutral world. You're living in a coded grid of symbols that tune your mind without your awareness. Every time you see them, your internal script is nudged. Not to think, to comply. Not because you're weak. Because that's how symbols work. They bypass the gatekeeper. They skip the debate. They install. But what happens when you take the gatekeeper back? What happens when you stop seeing symbols as art and start reading them as commands? That's when you stop being a consumer of reality and start becoming a coder. Let's make this clear. You've been taught to believe symbols are passive, that a symbol is just a representation, a way to simplify ideas, to trigger association, to mean something. But real symbols, living symbols, don't just mean. They do. They act. They program. They reorganize frequency at the subconscious level. And that's exactly why they've been hidden in plain sight. Think of it like this. Every culture, ancient or modern, created symbol systems. But not all symbols are created equal. Some were designed to hold identity, others to shape it. Look at a mandala. It doesn't just represent balance, it induces it. Its geometry pulls your attention inward, slows your breath, recalibrates your nervous system. Look at the Eye of Horus. It's not just a symbol of protection, it's a map of perception. Left brain, right brain, pineal gland. A message carved in code for how to see beyond the surface. These aren't abstract metaphors, they are architectural blueprints for consciousness. The ancients weren't just spiritual, they were engineers, coders of the invisible. They built temples like resonant machines, charged symbols with sound, used color, light, scent, and symbol in tandem, not for aesthetics, for activation. And today, the same methods are being used, but inverted. Corporate logos use sacred geometry. Flags harness chromatic resonance. Political sigils use simplified power symbols wrapped in nationalism. They don't want you to understand symbols. They want you to react to them automatically, predictably, emotionally. Because when your emotional body is tied to a symbol, they can move you without force. That's real control. And that's why awakening begins with decoding. You begin to trace back the symbols you serve, the ones burned into your loyalty, your fear, your identity. You ask, where did this come from? What does this shape actually encode? Why does this image feel so familiar? And why do I obey it? And something happens. You stop giving automatic reverence. You stop reacting. You start observing. And from that moment on, you become dangerous. Because you're no longer inside the symbol, you're outside it, reading the structure, breaking the spell. This is what secret schools were built to teach: symbol literacy, the ability to see reality not as a collection of events, but as a layered tapestry of codes, frequencies, and triggers. The question isn't, what do I believe? It's, what symbols are running that belief? Now let's go deeper into the reason symbols work at all. Not because they're pretty, not because they're historic, because they are compressed consciousness. A symbol is like a seed, small in shape, infinite in meaning. The more aware the observer, the more layers the symbol reveals. And the more subconscious the observer, the more the symbol controls. It's a feedback loop, and that's what makes symbols dangerous. They adapt to your level of awareness. To the unaware, a cross is just a religious sign. To the semi-aware, it's a representation of death and resurrection. To the awakened, it's an energetic device, vertical and horizontal axes, spirit and matter intersecting in the self, same shape, different depth. Now imagine that same principle being used on you, not once, but thousands of times a day. Through ads, through political campaigns, through design, through apps, through social rituals. No one questions anymore. You don't notice, but your mind is reading, responding, firing, aligning, compiling. And here's the harsh truth. If you don't learn to read symbols intentionally, you'll always be living in a reality someone else wrote. You'll wear their symbols, defend their symbols, even fight and die for their symbols, never realizing they were never yours. The first act of reclaiming your consciousness is to ask, whose code am I running? And the second, to write your own. Because symbol creation is not reserved for elites or mystics. It's your birthright. You can design your own symbols, charge them, anchor new frequencies, create your own meaning instead of renting someone else's. That's not rebellion, that's spiritual authorship. And if this message resonates like something you already knew, just forgotten, maybe it's because you were meant to find it. Subscribe now and hit the bell. Not for the channel, but so your signal keeps pulling in the data you actually came here to remember. Because what's coming next rewrites the blueprint. Let's unearth the forgotten lineage. Symbols didn't begin as religion. They weren't born from belief. They were technologies. Every ancient civilization had its own symbolic system, not to communicate ideas, but to transmit frequency. In Egypt, symbols were used in rituals to shift consciousness. In Sumer, they were encoded in cuneiform spells and celestial maps. In Vedic traditions, yantras weren't just designs, they were portals. In Mesoamerica, glyphs were multidimensional expressions of time, godhood, and intention. These weren't metaphors, they were blueprints. Symbol plus sound plus ritual equals programmed outcome. A pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a frequency chamber. The Eye of Horus wasn't just divine vision, it was a neurological map. The swastika, long before its corruption, encoded cosmic movement. These weren't symbols of ideas, they were tools to tune reality. Now fast forward, those same technologies were inverted, used not to awaken, but to distract, not to empower, but to divide, not to liberate, but to brand. Modern logos are built using sacred geometry, golden ratio, Fibonacci spirals, ancient angles of power, but they're empty shells. They're shells that feed on your energy by attaching to emotion, not truth. The flags you salute, the brands you wear, the icons you click, you think they're symbols, but they're contracts. Contracts you didn't read, you just agreed. By participating, by reacting, by obeying the pull, you're not just consuming symbols, you're feeding them, because every time you focus on one, you amplify it, you energize the code. This is why advertisers spend billions on visuals, because the battle isn't for your attention, it's for your symbolic loyalty. But here's the awakening. Once you see this pattern, you stop being the fuel, you become the fire. You begin to look at everything through a different lens. You ask, why was this image placed here? What is this symbol telling my subconscious? What spell is this trying to cast? And you begin to de-spell your life. You remove corrupted codes. You reclaim your mental altar. You start designing what you feed your field. Because the most powerful magic isn't hidden, it's everywhere, disguised as art, commerce, faith, routine. But once you start seeing, you don't stop. Here's where the transformation begins. Because once you've decoded the trap, you're left with one final, inescapable question. If symbols shape reality, what symbols are you using to shape yours? Most people never even think to ask. They decorate their lives with borrowed meaning. They tattoo icons without knowing the currents they awaken. They meditate with sigils they don't understand. They wear symbols that carry centuries of trauma, domination, and fear, thinking they're just fashion. But symbols are alive, not because they move, but because you do. Your focus charges them. Your belief anchors them. Your emotion feeds them. Your repetition binds you to them. And when enough people lock their attention onto a single symbol, it becomes a field, an egregore, a self-sustaining psychic structure that doesn't need belief anymore, just recognition. That's how religions are built. That's how empires are maintained. That's how consumer culture hijacked the sacred. But if that's true, if a symbol can manipulate a crowd, can shape a nation, can hold generations in silence, then what happens when a conscious human creates one on purpose? That's the forgotten art. Symbol crafting wasn't meant to be exclusive. It wasn't reserved for secret societies or cloaked mystics. It was your original language. You were born to code with image, pattern, vibration, not to decorate reality, but to write it. And here's how you begin. Not with books, not with borrowed systems, not with fancy rituals, but by listening. What symbol lives inside your story? What shape do your dreams return to again and again? What colors do your visions pulse with? What ancient form keeps showing up in your sketchbook, your childhood memories, your unspoken knowing? That's not aesthetics. That's resonant recall. You're not trying to find a symbol. You're remembering the one that found you. And when you draw it, not with perfection, but with presence, you anchor something real. You create a visual node in the field, a mirror to your inner frequency, a weapon, a tool, a map, not to impress others, but to tune yourself. Because the moment you reclaim the symbol, you reclaim the story. This is where the illusion ends. You were never meant to be a follower of symbols. You were meant to be their author. Somewhere along the way, you forgot. You forgot that symbols didn't come from outside of you. They came through you, encoded in your imagination, etched into your dreams, whispered through the voice of your intuition, not to decorate your path, but to shape it. Every time you see a symbol that moves something inside you, that's not coincidence. That's contact. It's your subconscious making eye contact with your own forgotten blueprint. The moment you give attention to a symbol, you give it energy. But the moment you give it awareness, you take back control. And now you see, the entire world is built on invisible agreements. Icons, badges, flags, fonts, frames. Reality isn't just observed, it's interpreted, and interpretation is coded. This is why nothing changes until your lens does. Not the people, not the politics, not even your past. Change the code, and the meaning rewrites itself. So now the question is no longer, what do symbols mean? The question is, which ones still own you, and which ones will you choose to build your next life? Because in this moment, as the screen fades, as the silence returns, as the world creeps back in, you have a choice: to forget this message and fall back asleep, or to use it as the first line of your own script. Symbols are not decoration, they are devices, doors, and you've just unlocked one. The question is, will you step through it, or will you decorate your prison with prettier icons? And before you go, answer this: what symbol has shaped your life without you realizing it? And what new symbol would you create to replace it? Drop your answer in the comments, because this isn't a video, it's a trigger, and your response is the real magic.